What if I told you there was a religious cult where members sat around in candlelight, chanting sacred hymns, and then raised a chalice of semen like it was the Holy Eucharist? Yeah, forget your wine and crackers. These guys went straight for the premium house blend. And no, I'm not making this up. This is history. Or at least, the kind of history that makes you want to call your therapist immediately after class. Hidden in dusty manuscripts and whispered about by scandalized clergy, there existed strange religious sects in Europe and the Near East that thought salvation came not through bread, not through prayer, but through swapping bodily fluids like it was happy hour at the world's worst bar. Why? Because they believed sex itself was the divine pathway to God, which is kind of beautiful until you realize they took it literally, to the point of ritual consumption. If you're already horrified, and maybe slightly curious, stick around. I've got the full menu of these freaky practices lined up for you, served with sarcasm and sprinkled with dark humor. And hey, if you like history so raw it should come with a biohazard label, you know what to do. Subscribe. Consider it like joining a cult, except the only initiation ritual is hitting that little red button. Way less messy. Let's get right into it. Number 1. Wine of the flesh. Picture a dimly lit medieval chamber filled with followers humming like a Gregorian choir on acid. Instead of uncorking a bottle of Bordeaux, the priest, or let's be honest, the guy with the weirdest job title ever, passes around a chalice. Inside, a sticky concoction of semen and sometimes menstrual blood, believed to embody the literal essence of life. Forget Napa Valley. This was straight out of the human body's private cellar. To them, Christ's blood and body weren't metaphors. They thought the true holy sacrament was ejaculate because, hey, what better symbol of creation than the goo that makes babies? In their eyes, guzzling this stuff was like downloading a piece of God's hard drive directly into your soul, except instead of a glowing halo, you probably just got a stomachache. Church officials, of course, lost their collective minds when they caught wind of this. For them, it wasn't just heresy, it was bodily fluids cosplay gone too far. But the cult thrived underground, passing on their secret recipe like grandma's lasagna, except much, much grosser. The irony? These rituals were supposed to purify the soul. Meanwhile, anyone looking on probably just wanted to purify the dishes with industrial bleach. Basically, if communion was about sipping wine to feel closer to Jesus, these guys thought it made sense to shotgun God's original recipe instead. Cheers. Number 2. Holy Orgies Anonymous. Now, if you thought drinking it was the worst part, buckle up. Because for these cults, the ritual wasn't complete without a communal production process. That's right, group sex wasn't just optional, it was mandatory. Imagine a church service that starts with a hymn, then devolves into what looks like a Roman bathhouse frat party. By the end, someone's holding up a chalice filled with the harvest, and everyone's expected to take a sip like it's the world's least appetizing communion line. This wasn't just about pleasure. To them, orgasm was a literal prayer. The moment of climax was seen as the divine spark, the brief instant where humans touched eternity. Instead of kneeling at an altar, you were, kneeling in a whole different way. The result was bottled up. Well, not literally bottled, and used as their sacred wine. The theology behind it was surprisingly poetic. Mixing fluids represented unity of male and female, heaven and earth, God and humanity. Which sounds deep until you remember you're basically slurping down a medieval smoothie of bodily secretions while trying not to gag. Neighbors, of course, thought these people were possessed lunatics. Imagine living next door and hearing muffled moans followed by suspicious clinking of chalices. No wonder they kept it secret. Nothing ruins a potluck invitation faster than explaining that your wine comes freshly tapped. So yeah, for these folks, Sunday service was less Amazing Grace and more 50 Shades of Sacrament. Number 3. The secret gospel of goo. Okay, so you're probably wondering, where the hell did anyone get the idea that chugging bodily fluids was holy? Believe it or not, they claimed it came straight from hidden scriptures. That's right, apocryphal gospels and whispered traditions said Jesus didn't just hand out bread and wine. Oh no. According to their interpretation, the true Eucharist was the living essence of the body. And when they said living essence, they meant semen. I wish I were joking. Some of these sects, often lumped together under the scandalous label of Gnostic perverts by angry bishops, believed mainstream Christianity had sanitized the real message. To them, the church's communion wafer was like a decaf latte, weak, bland, and missing the good stuff. Instead, they insisted salvation came from swallowing God's literal creative power. Forget Bible study. This was biology class gone horrifyingly hands-on. And they weren't subtle about it. Medieval heresy hunters wrote scandalized accounts of rituals where cult leaders would, quite literally, mix the holy ingredients into a cup and distribute it like the body of Christ. Scholars today argue about whether these reports were exaggerated propaganda. But let's be honest, the medieval church didn't have the imagination to invent something this gross from scratch. Somebody, somewhere, was definitely doing it. So yeah, the next time you hear someone talk about secret gospels, remember that sometimes what's hidden is hidden for a very good reason. Number 4, women as holy vessels. Here's the part where things get even more twisted. In these cults, women weren't just participants. They were walking chalices. Their bodies were treated as the literal containers of divine power. Menstrual blood, for instance, wasn't viewed as taboo. It was harvested as a sacred ingredient. Combine it with semen, and you had what they believed was the ultimate cocktail of creation. Life and death, male and female, all mixed into one big nightmare shot. Now, in a weird way, this was almost empowering. While mainstream religion often treated women like second-class citizens, these cults saw them as essential conduits of the divine. Their blood was honored, their sexuality celebrated, and their role elevated to cosmic importance. But don't get too warm and fuzzy, because it still boiled down to women being used as tools for rituals that made frat parties look wholesome. Imagine being told your holy duty was to bleed into a chalice so everyone else could get spiritually wasted. Kind of takes the romance out of religion, doesn't it? And yet, for these believers, the mingling of fluids was nothing short of cosmic fusion. The body wasn't sinful, it was a temple overflowing with divine energy. Unfortunately, that energy usually ended up in a goblet. The church, of course, branded this as satanic nonsense, proof that these people were cavorting with demons. But for the cult members, every drop was proof that God lived inside the body. And when I say inside, I really mean inside. Number 5, banquets of blasphemy. Imagine walking into what looks like a medieval potluck dinner. Candles, platters, communal cups. Except instead of roasted boar or a jug of mead, you're greeted by the worst buffet in history. Bowls of, let's call it, freshly harvested protein. These cult feasts were the ultimate dinner parties, where the main course wasn't food at all, but sacred body fluid cocktails prepared live on site. The ritual worked like this. Everyone participated in the offering. Then the mixture was ceremoniously stirred and passed around. Picture Grandma's punch bowl, except nobody's getting seconds without serious hesitation. To outsiders, this was cannibalism's slippery cousin, replacing flesh with fluids, but keeping the horror intact. And yet, for members, it wasn't gross. It was sacred performance art. They truly believed swallowing the stuff meant swallowing God. Their logic? If bread and wine could symbolize the divine, then why not the actual biological essence of life? Which, let's be honest, is the kind of loophole only a cult lawyer could argue with a straight face. Clergy who heard about these feasts wrote about them like they were horror movies. Some called them banquets of the devil, others tables of abomination. Meanwhile, the cult just kept topping off chalices and pretending they weren't about to barf. Basically, think of it as fine dining. If Gordon Ramsay walked in, screamed, "It's raw!" and then fainted. Number 6. Cloaks and cover-ups. So how did they get away with this? Simple: secrecy. These weren't your average church services with stained glass windows and tolling bells. Meetings happened in basements, caves, or locked rooms with a paranoid obsession for privacy. They had passwords, coded gestures, and probably the most awkward version of a secret handshake you can imagine. Why? Because if the authorities found out, you were toast. Literally. Heresy wasn't just frowned upon, it was a death sentence. So members disguised their rituals under layers of symbolic language. Outsiders thought they were chanting mystical hymns, but insiders knew the real meaning. It's harvest time, baby. Even manuscripts were written in veiled metaphors. Instead of flat-out saying, "We drink semen," they'd write flowery lines like, "We partake of the seed of creation, mingled with the blood of the holy vessel," which sounds poetic until you translate it into plain English and immediately wish you hadn't. But secrecy wasn't just about survival. It was also part of the thrill. For followers, being in on the divine secret made them feel chosen, elite, like they held knowledge too dangerous for ordinary mortals. And to be fair, they kind of did. After all, how many religions can honestly say their communion chalice doubled as a bodily fluids blender? Number 7. The devil made us do it. When word of these practices leaked, the church had a very convenient explanation. The devil was behind it all. Bishops and inquisitors painted these groups as literal satanic sex cults, complete with demonic orgies and black masses. Were they exaggerating? Probably. But given what we already know, they didn't exactly have to stretch the truth very far. The official narrative was that Lucifer whispered in their ears, tempting them to turn sacred rituals into depraved spectacles, eating bread and drinking wine holy, drinking the byproducts of a medieval group hookup. Pure blasphemy. And yet, ironically, labeling them as devil worshippers only made the story juicier, because nothing sells better in medieval Europe than the combination of sex and Satan. Trials were often filled with wild accusations, flying through the night to attend fluid-fueled feasts, kissing demons on the butt, and other salacious details. Did all of it happen? Almost certainly not. But was there a kernel of truth buried under the slander? Absolutely. After all, people don't just invent chalices of semen out of thin air. Even Satan himself would probably say, "Dude, that's too much." So while historians argue over what was real and what was medieval fear-mongering, one thing's certain. These cults left their enemies with enough nightmare fuel to last several centuries. Number 8. The purge of the fluid faithful. Of course, the party couldn't last forever. By the late Middle Ages, the church wasn't just annoyed, it was furious. And when the church got furious, people ended up on bonfires. Entire sects accused of fluid sacraments were hunted down, their gatherings broken apart, and their members either forced to recant or burned as heretics. Ironically, the secrecy that once kept them safe also made them guilty in the eyes of authorities. After all, if you're meeting in a basement and drinking from a mystery chalice, doesn't exactly scream totally normal Bible study. And so inquisitors swooped in, dragging confessions out with torture, because nothing says moral superiority like waterboarding someone until they admit they drank something worse. Over time, most of these groups disappeared into obscurity. Their manuscripts were destroyed, their rituals reduced to scandalous rumors scribbled in the margins of church records. But traces linger, just enough to keep historians arguing and internet weirdos, like us, utterly fascinated. Think of it as the medieval version of cancel culture. Only instead of losing your TikTok account, you lost your head. Number 9. Echoes in the modern world. Here's the unsettling twist. The cult may have died, but the idea didn't. Even today, scattered esoteric groups and fringe, sex magic practitioners echo bits of this theology. Some modern occultists, influenced by Aleister Crowley and his ilk, still treat semen and menstrual blood as sacred substances in ritual. They call it the elixir of life, which is basically just a fancy way of saying organic protein, shake from hell. Of course, nobody's openly advertising chalice sharing orgies on Sunday mornings, well, not outside certain clubs, but the concept that sex is divine, that fluids hold spiritual energy, still lingers. It's the weird ghost of a heresy that refuses to die. Like a bad smell in history's basement, it keeps coming back. So the next time you hear someone brag about drinking a raw egg smoothie for vitality, just remember, you could always one-up them by citing medieval cult recipes. Instant conversation ender. So what do we actually learn from all this? Besides the fact that medieval Europe had more kinks than a badly folded hose, it's that people will go to insane lengths to feel closer to the divine. When traditional religion told them, kneel, pray, sip wine, these folks said, nah, let's make it weird. And wow, did they ever. It's easy to laugh at them, but deep down, it's the same impulse we see today. Humans chasing transcendence, whether through psychedelics, yoga retreats, or chugging kale smoothies that taste only slightly less awful than what these cults drank. History's gross reminder is this: the line between sacred and revolting is often thinner than we think. So yeah, if history teaches us anything, it's that power makes people do really gross things, and that maybe, just maybe, our world isn't as modern as we like to think. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.